answered for you. Okay, so in this case, my username would be admin and the password would be the same password that we received yesterday. Now, this is where Control R comes in handy. So if I simply go and I say Control R, I remember there was a directory called secret which had my password, but I don't really remember the full path. But I know for a fact that I obtained the password yesterday. So what I can do is I can simply do Control R and search for secret, and it gives me the full command that I ran yesterday. Now, if I hit enter, I'll get the password. As simple as that. So I'll copy the password and I'll paste it here and we'll sign in to Jenkins. Okay, so Vishal says, I installed Jenkins, but I fell short on the resources, and he gets an error that says not enough resources. In that case, Vishal, you can turn off this machine. You can like click on stop. Oops. Okay. I really thought it will give me, prompt saying, do you really want to turn this machine off? It did not. But in that case, you want to turn off the machine, then go to the machine and you can edit the resources to your machine. So you can simply click on edit and you can edit the CPU and the memory that your machine has. So in this case, I'm just looking for how would I edit. Let's see. It's still stopping actually. So once it's completely stopped, you will get an option to, yeah, right? So I can increase the CPUs and the memory from here. So in that case, if you have the problem with the resources, you can stop the server and edit the resources that you have. I'll start this again. Ramesh says Control R command is also same in EC2 command prompt. So Ramesh, in EC2 you don't really have a command prompt. So please stop using the word command prompt. It's called a terminal or it's called the SSH terminal. And we are talking about Linux in general. So it does not matter if you're working with AWS or Google Cloud or anything. These are the Ubuntu commands. So it does not matter where you have a server hosted, they would always work. Uh, Aditya says, Nishant, my internet connection just lost 10 minutes ago. Can you please repeat the instructions given again? I'm sorry, Aditya. I don't think I can because we've got 40 people in the batch right now. So if I keep repeating things for everyone, we'll not really learn anything and I'll just end up repeating everything. So if you've not had the chance to be here for 10 minutes, I would recommend you look at the video recording at the end of the day and then ask me the questions if you have any. Cool. So we'll go back to the server. All right, we'll make sure the Jenkins is up and running again. Ramesh says, so if I connect to EC2 using PuTTY, can I still run the same command? Yes, Ramesh. Going by the logic that all of our servers are using Ubuntu, the same commands would work. It does not really matter if you're using EC2 or Google Cloud or anything else or a local VM. All of the same commands would work no matter what server you're using. Okay, so in my case, okay, probably my IP address has changed. So let's get the IP address and we'll try that again. And here's another quick tip. Whenever you restart a server in cloud, it might be Google Cloud or it might be AWS or anything, you're not guaranteed to have the same public IP address. Your IP address would change every time you restart your server. Unless you reserved an IP address for yourself. Now, reserving an IP address would obviously have more cost. So I'll go back, I'll get my password, and we'll log into Jenkins. We'll give it a moment. Okay, so here's what we did yesterday. We simply created a job called my job, and we ran the command that says echo hello world, which basically returns hello world to the user. That's the only thing that we did. Now we'll move ahead from here. We are yet to explore what the UI looks like and what options do you have. But at this point in time, we simply want to see, basics of job, and that's how we want to get started. So what we'll do is we'll click on My Job that we created yesterday, and we'll click on Configure. Now, I'll zoom in a little bit. By clicking on Configure, you can edit or modify the job that you created or that's already created. So I can click on configure and that will, give me to the same page where I can modify or create a new job for myself. Now, so yesterday we said echo hello world. That was the only thing my job was doing. The same way I can also say date temp date.txt. Now this is what I really want to do. And then probably do echo good day, right? So the only thing this command does, now here's the important part. It's not really about Jenkins so much as it's about you understanding what the command does. So if, as I said yesterday, if you really wanted to run, if your requirement was to run apt-get update at midnight every night on 100 servers, you can do that using Jenkins. So before we can save this job and we execute this job, it's important that you understand what date command does and what these arrow would do and what exactly is this. So to give you an example, I can type date, which will give me the current date and time of my server. Now, obviously, this is not Indian Standard Time. This is the time that is set up in the server. You can modify the time to reflect the Indian time zone, but that's completely up to you. So in this case, I'm simply saying date, and whatever output we receive by date, save it to a file called date.txt, which is within the temp directory. That's the only thing I'm doing here. So I could also do date sumefile.txt. Now I have a file called sumefile.txt, and if I look at sumefile.txt, it has the output of whatever the output was of date at that point in time. So I'll remove the file. The only thing I'm doing here is I'm saying date and record the output into this particular file and then simply run good day. That's the only thing I'm doing. So we'll click on save and then we'll click on build to actually execute the job. So let's click on build. Now in this case, it says job is building. So we can click on this balloon to see the logs of the job. So it says started by user admin because obviously I started this job manually. Nothing triggered this job automatically or no one triggered this job remotely. I started the job manually, which is the reason why it says started by user admin. And then it ran the date command and it ran the good day command, which is obviously why it received good day as the response. But if I go to my server and if I go to the temp directory, I have this file called date.txt. So if I look at date.txt, this is the output that was generated when the job was run. So I hope you understand the things you can run locally, like the commands you can run. You can also automate the commands using Jenkins. So any command that you might have, something as simple as apt-get update, something as simple as I don't know what, something as simple as apt upgrade. Sorry, uh, apt upgrade. So any Linux command that you run manually, you can automate that by using Jenkins and make Jenkins run those commands for you, which is where I said you can think of Jenkins like like your personal assistant. So Jenkins can basically run the commands and execute the jobs or tasks on behalf of you. You don't really need to be there to monitor or manually run the task. So this was a very simplified and very simple example. Let's look at what exactly happens in the background when you actually run a command or a job. So if I go to, so whenever you install Jenkins, by default, the installation directory for Jenkins is var lib Jenkins. Every file related to Jenkins or every directory related to Jenkins would be found under this particular directory, var lib Jenkins. Now the directory that we are concerned about right now It's called workspaces. There is no S at the end. It's just called workspace. So if I go into workspace, let's clear the screen and let's list the files. Now in workspace, I have this directory called my job. Now, if you remember, that's exactly what we named the job that I have. So for every job that you have, in this case, this is called my job. So for every job that you have, you'll find a corresponding directory into your server in var lib Jenkins workspace. So for every job, there will be one directory. So if I get into my job, you'll see some files and some folders there. Obviously, in this case, there are no files and folders because it was a simple Linux command that was being executed. But if you had something more viable or something more important or significant getting done in the job, you'll find the corresponding file in this particular directory. So I hope we are clear so far. So that's the basic idea of how you can create a job and how you can run a job. Now, in most cases, you would not really be running Linux commands. You'll be using Jenkins to do things that are much more complicated. So we'll get to them in a few minutes, but that's what it looks like basically. You can click on new item, configure the job as you would want it to be, and then you can click on build to actually run the job. Now, before we actually get to the advanced understanding of how the jobs work, how Jenkins work, and all of that, it's important that we understand how Jenkins works on itself. Like before you actually create the job, you also have to manage the Jenkins installation itself. So that's what we'll start with, and then subsequently we'll move on to the jobs and the pipelines and all of them. So most of the things that you would want to do with Jenkins is available in this link that's called Manage Jenkins. So if I click on Manage Jenkins, you'll see you have a lot of options here to basically configure the Jenkins and how exactly would Jenkins behave in in case of some event was to happen. So the first thing we'll do is we'll look at let's just say we'll look at configure global security. So that's the first thing that we want to do, right? So let's say you're working for a company, you install Jenkins, and now you have your teammates, you have developers that want access to your Jenkins installation. So obviously it's not really suitable for you to manually create all the users for, everyone that wants the access to it. So there are multiple ways to control the access to Jenkins when it comes to Jenkins. So the first option that I have is Jenkins. So the first option that I have is how exactly is identity management done in Jenkins. So the first option is Jenkins would use its own database, which is what you would use in most of the cases. And the second option you have is you can connect Jenkins to one of your centralized identity management like LDAP. So yesterday somebody had a question about Active Directory and LDAP. So if your company uses some sort of Active Directory or LDAP, you can connect Jenkins and it will automatically create user accounts for every account that's in your LDAP. But in most of the cases, you would not really assign everyone access to Jenkins. Jenkins would be limited to people in your DevOps team, probably the team managers and team leaders of the development team, but you would not be creating users for everyone in Jenkins. You want to control access of Jenkins really vigilantly because most of your infrastructure would be running on Jenkins. So in this case, as I said, in 99% of the cases, you will be selecting the option that says Jenkins would use its own database. Then the second option that I have here, that's called authorization. So obviously, when you create Jenkins, do you want people to be able to sign up themselves? Do you want to create accounts for people? And how do you ensure that everybody has access to the jobs they're supposed to have access to? So that's what we're going to do here. Now, before we actually, look at these options, let's look at the scenario in general. So let's say the very first option that we have there is anybody can sign up on Jenkins. So if this was my Jenkins server, right now, anybody can sign up to my Jenkins and anybody who's logged into Jenkins will have full administrative rights. That's how my Jenkins will respond right now. So if anybody that is able to log into my Jenkins, they can do everything that I can do. Basically, they'll have all the administrative rights. So obviously, that's not what you would want in a production environment. So what you would rather want is you would want to be able to create user accounts for people that need to have access to Jenkins. Now I'll repeat myself, you would not need to create user accounts for everyone. Jenkins, having access to Jenkins, it's a privileged thing. So you would only be creating user accounts for people that are important and people that have the decision making power. So you would not, let's say if you have a team of 50 developers, you would not really be creating 50 accounts for each one of them. Probably one account for, one of the managers that actually looks after the team. So Jenkins is very limited in terms of allowing access to somebody. Now let's say you have three people. Now assume, I'm sorry, I'm really bad at drawing. So let's say this was the first guy, this is the second guy, and this is the third guy. So you have three guys that require access to Jenkins. Now in that case, I'll tell you what exactly do you need or how exactly would you want the access to work. So the first thing I would need is I want to be able to create user accounts for each one of them. And the second thing that I need is, let's say if I create a job in Jenkins, if this is my job one, and let's say this guy is from development team one, this guy is from development team two, and this guy is from finance. Now, obviously, the guy from finance